What's up, guys? Good mic work commentaries back at you, and happy WrestleMania 38 weekend. We have got a long weekend of festivities planned out here on the channel, and we're going to kick things off tonight with a Patreon-sponsored review. This one comes courtesy of longtime listener, subscriber, and supporter of the channel, Reese Jones, who has actually donated to have some reviews done in the past, and he had a really good idea for this podcast discussion, and that is WrestleMania matches where the wrong guy won, or the wrong wrestler or wrestlers won. And that's something we've talked about in bits and pieces throughout the years, but never really in one long podcast. So I've been wanting to do some WrestleMania related videos for WrestleMania season. Of course, we have been doing the watch alongs on the channel, and Reese has very kindly donated to have this podcast done. And I think this is going to be a fun one because it's completely opinion. This is going to be completely subjective. Please let me know if I'm leaving any matches out that you think need to be added to the list. If you disagree with any, feel free to let me know as well. Just keep in mind, this is all opinion. This is just what I think. Reese has also assisted in this by giving me a list of matches that he thinks where the wrong person won. And the way we kind of did this is he kind of took care of the second half of WrestleManias, and I took care of some of the early ones. So I really kind of took a look at WrestleManias like 1 through 20, and then he picked things up after that and gave me some really good ideas for some of these later WrestleManias. And a lot of these matches, I think many of you are going to agree with. So please feel free to discuss and engage in the description, or I'm sorry, in the comments below with anything you could elaborate on or possibly add to this list of matches that we're going to go through here. So basically how I'm going to do it is I'm going to run through each WrestleMania. We'll start with WrestleMania 1 and we'll go through them all. Now, not every single WrestleMania has a match on there that I would switch. There's a couple of them when I was looking at the cards and kind of rereading them and remembering, I'm like, I really have no issues with this one or this one. So there's a couple of WrestleManias out there that I'm actually fine with most of the outcomes, but there are some bigger matches, some more well-known matches like, of course, Triple H and Booker T at WrestleMania 19, matches like that. But I also took the time to kind of think about some of the undercard matches as well, especially in some of these early WrestleManias, to see if there's anything I might have changed or could have been changed for the better. So that's going to basically be the topic of discussion this evening. I would like to ask you guys to please subscribe and also click the like button on this video to help out the channel with the algorithms and all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're here all WrestleMania weekend long. Starting tomorrow night after SmackDown and the Hall of Fame, we're going to review both of those shows and predict both nights of WrestleMania. And then, of course, Saturday night after night one, we'll be up here to review the show as well as talk about NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver. And then, of course, Sunday night after night two, we will do another big review of probably both nights before we head into the next night's post-Mania Monday Night Raw, which I will also be here to do a review for. So you got me the next 4 nights, 5 if you include this video, and it should be a blast. WrestleMania is always fun on this channel, and coming up in about a week or so, we've got our 12-year anniversary on YouTube. Unreal. But Reese, I want to thank you again for your donation, and thank you for being such a great supporter of the channel. If you are interested in sponsoring one of these videos yourself, you can head over to the Patreon page. Link is in the description, and all of the instructions on how to do that are over there. But without further ado, let's start running through some of the matches in WrestleMania history where the wrong person won. So here we go. We're going to start with WrestleMania 1, and this is one of the WrestleManias where I really have no issue with any of these outcomes. I think WrestleMania 1 needed a title change, so I can understand why the tag titles changed hands since the world title was not on the line. And Greg Valentine, his match went to a DQ against the Junkyard Dog, so I think having Sheik and Volkov win the titles was okay. And really, when I look at the rest of the card, no issues at all. I am almost the same with WrestleMania 2, or I feel almost the same way about WrestleMania 2. No real issues on this card at all, except for perhaps I would have had Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog beat the Funks. Tito has got a terrible record at WrestleMania after WrestleMania 1, and I think it would have been better here for him and JYD, who had been in the WWF for a while by this point and we're both very over, to knock off the Funks. That's just my personal opinion. But really, at the end of the day, I don't have too many issues with WrestleMania 2 either. WrestleMania 3 is an interesting one. Now, you guys know by now, I was at WrestleMania 3 when I was a kid. I was born in Pontiac, Michigan, and I watched Danny Davis fuck over the British Bulldogs and help the Hart Foundation win the titles as heels. And then they are going into WrestleMania 3 in a match that I thought should have been for the tag team championships. This should have been a rematch between the Bulldogs and the Harts, but Dynamite's injury may have played a role in that. He was able to get healthy enough to work WrestleMania 3 after being injured and having to drop the belts to the Harts earlier on in 1987. So now you're heading into WrestleMania. I thought it would have been a perfect place to do the rematch and put the Bulldogs over. At that time, the Bulldogs were my favorite tag team in the WWE. Hart Foundation would overtake them when I would fall in love with Bret Hart shortly after this, but I wasn't there yet, and I was really hoping that the Harts would drop the belts to the Bulldogs, and it would be 2 years in a row for the British Bulldogs to win the tag team titles at WrestleMania, this time in front of like 100,000 people. I was ready to see it, but instead, they booked the six-man and put referee Danny Davis, who was suspended for life, in the ring as a wrestler to take on the Bulldogs and Tito Santana, the guy that Davis screwed out of the Intercontinental title against Savage the previous year. So despite the fact that we weren't going to get a tag team title match, at least in my eyes, I thought we were going to see Danny Davis get the absolute shit beaten out of him. So this was like a double disappointment to me. Not only did they not have the tag team titles on the line at this mega show, but the heels won. After Danny Davis did all that dirty work, not only did the heels win, but Danny Davis got the pin, I believe on Dynamite, hitting him with the megaphone. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of pinning champions or whatnot, but I think the baby faces should have gone over here simply by pinning Danny Davis. That's all you had to do, is beat the hell out of him and give the fans a nice little moment there. And that would have at least given me, Greg, 10-year-old Greg, some comfort after what I saw happen to the British Bulldogs, and I remember that being a big disappointment. So I would have put the baby faces over in that. And if you didn't do it there, then I would have done Jake and Honky. One of these two matches I think definitely needed to change. Jake the Snake Roberts later on in the show would have Alice Cooper in his corner, for F's sake. You know, a guy who's like a legend in Detroit. And Honky Tonk Man, he was about to beat Steamboat for the title in a couple of months, but he was still kind of a joke of a character. And I would have loved to see Jimmy Hart and Alice Cooper get involved, and then Honky get distracted and turn around and eat a DDT and lose. And it would have been a nice, another babyface moment for the crowd. So maybe it's too much to ask for both of those matches to have gone the other way, but at least one of them. Jake should have at least beaten Honky, or the Bulldogs and Tito should have beaten Danny Davis and the Hart Foundation. That's my personal opinion of WrestleMania 3. In terms of the rest of the card, though, totally fine with it. Moving on to WrestleMania 4, how weird is it that the British Bulldogs had to be in two back-to-back bizarre six-men matches at WrestleMania? WrestleMania 3 with Tito against Davis and the Harts. This year at WrestleMania 4, they teamed up with Coco to take on the Islanders and Bobby the Brain Heenan. And once again, the baby faces come out on the losing end here. Bobby the Brain Heenan is in this match dressed in like a dog keeper's protective suit. He's a manager who barely even wrestles at this point. And much like they had the advantage the year before with a weaker Link on the heel side, it still wasn't enough for them to overcome. And they wound up losing again to the heels. And Islanders and Bobby Heenan had already kidnapped Matilda and done a horrible ordeal to that dog and put it through hell. So you would think there is revenge on the mind of the baby faces, but once again, the Bulldogs fall short, and I would have had them win here too. I would have had the Bulldogs and Coco beat the Islanders and Bobby. I kind of think that Honky Tonk Man and Brutus Beefcake should have gone the other way. I really enjoyed Honky losing the Intercontinental title to SummerSlam, or at SummerSlam, to the Ultimate Warrior a few months after this, but he had already held on to the title for a long time. He had held it, you know, all the way since the previous June or something. Now it's WrestleMania of the next year. Beefcake, like him or not, he was over like Rover, and I was expecting him to win the Intercontinental title here. And when he didn't, I was a little bit disappointed, to be honest. I wasn't a huge fan of Beefcake or Honky, but I definitely like Beefer better than Honker. and I was hoping he would win the Intercontinental title, and he didn't. Peggy Sue was out there, who of course was Sensational Sherry and Jimmy Hart, and all sorts of outside the ring shenanigans were going down. The match ended in a disqualification, and I think Jimmy Hart even got his hair cut, but no title change, and Ultimate Warrior would be the guy to take the title off of Honky. You know, something like 4 months later, he would continue to hold that belt for. So I was getting real tired of Honky Tonk Man with the Intercontinental title, especially since it had been on guys like Tito Savage and Steamboat before him. I didn't like this guy as champion at all. Of course, WrestleMania 4 also had the big 16-man tournament for the vacant WWE title. And I've talked about this match before. One of the biggest, in my mind, missed opportunities here at WrestleMania 4 that I think would have been fun for the fans. One of the opening round matches with Greg the Hammer Valentine against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Now, the winner of this match would take on the winner of Macho Man Randy Savage and Butch Reed. Now, Savage would beat Reed to advance. Now it's Valentine and Steamboat's turn, and Valentine actually pulls off an upset win over Steamboat. I think he holds the ropes or something, gets some extra leverage, and is able to steal a win. Now, what I would have done here is I would have had Steamboat beat Valentine, and I would have given the fans a fun little second-round babyface match between Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage. This would have been a return from the previous year. Savage, of course, was an evil heel at WrestleMania 3, and Steamboat was the babyface. Now Savage is a face, so is Steamboat. He had been off for a while because he wanted time off to have his, the son to be born, and Vince didn't want to give him the time off, so he had to drop the title, and then he left for a while. Now he's back. He even brought his son to the ring with him before the match against Valentine, and he lost in the first round. Now, looking at the tournament bracket, I understand why WWE did that, especially since you're building Macho on this road to the championship, and he's going to beat all these heels along the way. But I think it would have been fun for the fans to see that match and have Savage win. Just roll him up with an inside cradle or something and get the win. Little show of respect handshake between the two guys, water under the bridge type of stuff from a year before. Savage, or Steamboat gives Savage a little pat on the ass, a little go get him, nice win and see you down the road type of thing. For me, I would have loved that. And it would have made Savage's tournament win even that much stronger to now beat the guy who beat you the previous year on your way to winning the world championship. That's what I would have done, and they didn't do it. I kind of get why they didn't do it, but especially with the time period that it was, but that's what I would have done, and it would have been super fun for a fan like me. Also, Bam Bam Bigelow was kind of being pushed hard, and he got ousted in the first round as well due to a count out, I believe, against the one-man gang. But a lot of the outcomes in these matches was because of what the end result was going to be. So you had to set Savage up with the right type of opponents. So even though it didn't really make sense for Bam Bam to lose, it made sense in the long run for Savage to face Gang in the semifinals instead of Bam Bam. And that's kind of why Jake Roberts and Rick Rude went to a draw, was so Ted DiBiase could get some heel heat by getting a bye in the second round or whatever it was. Moving on to WrestleMania 5 now. You know what? I don't have any issues with WrestleMania 5. I was cool with Rick Rude winning the Intercontinental title. I was cool with Demolition retaining the tags in that handicap match with Fuji and Powers of Pain. And I was cool with Hogan winning the title in the main event of WrestleMania 5. That was the direction you could tell they were going in from a year ago. And the Mega Powers exploding and culminating in that way was probably the right way to go. And in terms of the undercard, really no issues with any of the matches there. So good booking, WWE. WrestleMania 6, a couple of issues here maybe. Probably I would not have ended Mr. Perfect's streak against Brutus Beefcake. I think Perfect had technically lost on some live events before, but they were kind of promoting and building him as undefeated. And to have Beefcake beat him, I maybe would have not done that. I would have had Perfect win because Perfect right after this would go on to win the vacant Intercontinental title in that tournament. And I would have had Perfect win that title with the undefeated moniker that he had, or the perfect record that they were claiming he had. I would have had him win the Intercontinental title that way and then drop it to maybe Beefcake if Kerry Von Erich didn't come in. So that match I definitely would have changed. And also I would have changed Orient Express and Rockers. I know it's an undercard match that really doesn't matter, but That was a count-out victory for the Orient Express, which was kind of weird, and the Rockers were a really exciting team, and I think you should have just flat-out put them over, the Orient Express. Everything else, however, Demolition beating Colossal Connection, and Ultimate Warrior, of course, beating Hulk Hogan, I was cool with. Didn't have too much of an issue with DiBiase retaining the $1 million title or anything like that over Jake. I thought that match was great. And not too many other matches on that card that I would really switch up. WrestleMania 7, probably the only one I would change. We just watched this in a watch-along on Sunday, this past Sunday. And I would not have had Randy Savage's career end at the hands of the Ultimate Warrior with a boot on his chest. It was a great ending in terms of the Savage and Liz reunion. All of that was great, and the fans and the audience members crying their eyes out, and it kind of giving you a happy ending. But when you would see what the Ultimate Warrior would wind up doing, and he would be leaving the company in just a few months after kind of having the fallout with Vince McMahon, and then Savage would wind up coming back into the ring, I would have reversed this, or I would not have made this a career-ending match at all. When you look at Savage and how good he was in 1991, imagine sitting there thinking a guy like this is past his prime. You know, Savage was still more than capable of giving many, many years in the ring. And sometimes you really didn't understand Vince's thinking on things. So I would not have beaten Savage the way they did at WrestleMania 7 at all. WrestleMania 8 is interesting. There's some maybes here. The main event is one that I didn't really love because we had a DQ finish in the main event. That's horseshit. So I almost think that based on the fact that WWE decided not to go with Hogan and Flair and not do that match that was just sitting right in their laps, and instead to have Hogan work with Sid, and Hogan's going to be leaving now to go make movies and to potentially never return, you should use this opportunity to put somebody else over. And as crazy as it sounds, we can debate whether or not Sid is the right guy another time, but if you're going to have Hulk Hogan have a last WrestleMania match, he should put somebody else over, and maybe he should have lost to Sid, but that would have kind of messed up the Ultimate Warrior's return. And I also would have maybe moved it earlier on in the card. I know the Ultimate Warrior coming back was a great way to close out WrestleMania 8, but it would have been a good thing to have in the middle of the show too. And Randy Savage winning the title against Ric Flair, I think would have gotten an equal amount of joy and happiness from the audience, because that was a great moment too. So I probably would have maybe not changed the outcome necessarily of any of these matches, but definitely would have changed the placement of a couple of these at WrestleMania 8. And I think the championship should have been in the main event. WWE deciding to move away from Hogan and Flair, they had their reasons, but if you're going to put the belt on Savage, then that's what should close the show, especially since Savage is a babyface. So maybe I'd have Hogan flat out lose to Sid, and I would definitely move the placement of the matches for sure. But WWE didn't think that way back then. They definitely wanted to have the Warriors return to be a show closing moment, and it was. But just like WrestleMania 7, they wound up looking like idiots because just a few months later, just like the previous year in 1991, Ultimate Warrior would be gone again. Keeping on the subject of the Hulkster, let's move on to WrestleMania 9. He's got like two of them on this show. Number one, I think Hogan and Beefcake should have won the tag team titles against Money Inc. Why not? It was a different time. It was already trippy enough to me that Hogan was back now that we had moved into the Bret Hart era, the Monday Night Raw era in the Manhattan Center. And the business and the feel and the vibe of WWE had changed greatly. And then here comes Hulk Hogan back in, along with Beefcake this time. And he's got the face mask on, and Jimmy Hart turns babyface. And now they're this big babyface unit. They start a feud with Money Inc. and go into WrestleMania 9. I'm like, that's really crazy for a fan like me. I never expected in a million years that Hulk Hogan would be a tag team champion in WWE, but that night, going into WrestleMania 9, that's what I expected to see. I thought for sure Hogan and Beefcake would beat Money Inc. and win the tag titles, and I thought that was going to be fun and interesting. But that didn't happen. It ended in a DQ. They walk away without the titles. Hogan, of course, got himself that big black eye, and they started planting some seeds as to what was going to go down throughout the show of WrestleMania 9, when they did an interview with Hogan, and he started talking about Bret Hart and Yokozuna. And I'm like, what is he doing? This has nothing to do with him, and why is he even mentioning this? And that's when you were like, oh shit. And then sure enough, Bret drops the title. Hogan comes out, gets challenged by Yoko. wins the title and celebrates at the end of WrestleMania 9. Complete wrong thing to do. It still bothers me that Vince McMahon just was that far out of touch that he would constantly go back to the Hogan well. And this wouldn't last, of course, because then Hogan would drop the belt right back to Yoko at King of the Ring and then split without giving WWE a chance to, have him put over Brett, like we all heard was the plan at SummerSlam 1993. So if that plan would have been followed through with, then fine. Doing the deal with Hogan at WrestleMania 9 would be a lot less of a big deal. But the fact that Hogan left ruined everything and never gave Brett a chance to really get that match or get that torch passing moment against Hulk. And I just think it was the wrong idea altogether. So Hulk Hogan shouldn't have even been involved in WrestleMania 9, much less have two matches that I completely fucking hated. WrestleMania 10 would make me feel better in terms of what went on with Bret Hart, because he would go on to win the WWE title in the main event of WrestleMania 10. And the entire card of WrestleMania 10, again, I don't really have any issues with it. Maybe, and this is going to sound crazy coming from me, but perhaps I would have put the tag team titles on Men on a Mission. I think that for that time, the tag team division was really weak. Men on a Mission was really lame, but they sure as hell were an interesting team. WWE had not had anyone in the company that size since like Andre the Giant, that the size of Mabel. You had your Bundys and stuff in there, and he would be coming back actually in late 94, King Kong Bundy. But Mabel was so big and so tall, and he was the biggest thing probably since Andre, because he even had Yoko beat in overall height. So it's just an overall size. He was such a mountain of a man. And they were a unique looking team. So the tag team division was weak as hell as it was. I don't think it would have harmed the tag team division in any way. The Quebecers were obnoxious and annoying. I think that would have been my one issue with WrestleMania 10, is that I would have belted Men on a Mission. I know that sounds crazy. WrestleMania 11, again, not the best WrestleMania, one of the worst WrestleManias ever, but really when you look at the results of the matches, I don't have an issue. If anything, I would have liked to see Razor Ramon win the Intercontinental title back. That didn't happen, so I might have changed that. I think that was another DQ situation where I think he won by disqualification, but I think he should have won the IC title back. And, some fans would have liked to see Bam Bam beat Lawrence Taylor, but we all knew that wasn't going to happen. So I don't really have any issues with WrestleMania 11 at all. I don't have any issues with WrestleMania 12 either, although maybe I would have had the baby faces winning in the opener. I think it was Bulldog, Owen, and Vader taking on Ahmed, Jake, and Yoko. That might have been the deal where they had like the 5-minute rule with Jim Cornette. If the faces won, I don't know, Yoko gets Cornette for 5 minutes or something like that, and the heels won that. But when you look at WrestleMania 12, it's all baby faces winning, I think, except for Steve Austin, who beat Savio Vega. But all the other matches, it was Taker beating Diesel and Piper beating Goldust and Shawn beating Brett and that sort of thing. So maybe they had to have some heels there. But I might have had the baby faces win the opener just to give the fans something to cheer about, to watch Jim Cornette get his ass kicked all over the ring. It might have been fun. Fast forwarding to WrestleMania 13, we've been talking about the tag team titles a lot here at WrestleManias. I would have put it on Mankind and Vader for sure. They had a long history. The ear came off in Germany. They had a long run together as opponents in WCW as well. Now they're teamed up again, this time in the WWE, under the tutelage of Paul Bearer. Bulldog and Owen were undergoing all sorts of dissension around this time. As a matter of fact, just a week or so later, after Brett would fully turn heel the night after WrestleMania on Raw, I think it was the following week, where he came out and interrupted Bulldog and Owen's either match or fight or whatever was going on and reunited the Hart Foundation. And I think that losing the tag team titles here could have acted as like rock bottom for them. And if they lost the tag team titles here to Mankind and Vader, they would be a really interesting team together with the tag team titles. And then Brett could then regroup his family a couple of weeks later on Raw, just like he did, and then motivate them to go back out there and re-win and regain their tag team titles. But I think they kept the championships through all of this dissension. And then Owen would go on to win the Intercontinental title once the Evil Heart Foundation was formed. And then he had 2 titles. And I think it would take until like early summer or spring or late spring when Austin and Shawn beat Owen and Davey for the tags on Raw in that famous Shawn return match. So at WrestleMania 13, I think it would have almost benefited the story of Owen and Bulldog for them to drop the tag team titles here, and that would really add to their dissension. And then when it boils over on Raw, you have Bret Hart coming out and getting everybody back together. So I would have put the tags on Mankind and Vader for sure. I think it would have been fun. I have 0 issues with WrestleMania 14 and WrestleMania 15. Looked at the card on both shows. I was at WrestleMania 15. I didn't love that WrestleMania, but I don't know if I'd really go out of my way to change very many outcomes, really at all. So I had no issue with that. And of course, WrestleMania 14, no issue at all either. Maybe I would have done something different with Rock and Ken Shamrock, but WWE had big plans for Rock, and I think that's why they kind of kept the belt on him there. Other than that, no issues with either one of those two. WrestleMania 16, however, that one was awful. And I think the only one I would change here, and Reese actually does agree with me on this one, and that is the main event. The Fatal 4-Way elimination. That was way overdone, I think. I think the match to do there just should have been Triple H versus The Rock one-on-one. And if you did insist on doing the 4-way, then you still have The Rock win, because then you can do return matches at the next couple of pay-per-views, which they would do anyway. So WrestleMania kind of got away from what they had been doing prior to that. I mean, think about it. WrestleMania 12, 13, 14, and 15, a babyface won the championship in the main event, and The Rock was super over. Austin was on the shelf with a neck injury. Triple H was a hated heel after what he did to Cactus Jack and retiring Mick Foley, and this would have been the perfect place for him to drop the belt, but instead he retains. Now, in some ways, that's great because it breaks the streak. It breaks the tradition of always having a babyface win and the fans going home happy. We hadn't seen any heel win the main event of WrestleMania ever. Ever. It had never happened up until this point, and it was really shocking. And it was really surprising that that's what they did. And of course, the next month, The Rock would then win the title at Backlash in a great moment, but that moment should have been at WrestleMania, and it wasn't. So I definitely would have changed the main event of WrestleMania 16 for sure. We got to talk about WrestleMania 19 now. Of course, this one is extremely controversial, and that is the World Heavyweight Championship match between Triple H and Booker T. Triple H was champion going into this thing. Booker T had finally started getting over as a babyface. He came in with the WCW buyout, and he was a heel. Now, he had closed out WCW as a babyface, when he won the championship at Bash at the Beach the previous year, and then closed out WCW as their champion. He was over. He came into the WWE as a cowardly heel on the Alliance side, of course. And then when that ended, went into his feud with Austin, where he was humiliated some more, and then finally started turning the corner, and WWE realizing how fucking entertaining he is, and they got a little bit less spiteful with how they handle some WCW talent and finally started to recognize Booker T. And I think even in the build up to this, Booker T got this title opportunity by winning a battle royal, last eliminating The Rock, correct? So I felt like he had all of the momentum. And Triple H, by this point, had already garnered a lot of hatred from the audience. We talked about this recently when Triple H announced his retirement. I talked a lot about this, how this guy was very, very over, even as a heel when he got injured in 2001, tearing his quad, when he came back the next year in MSG, and how over he was and how much the fans missed him and how much we really appreciated. We didn't know how much we missed him until he was gone. And I remember fans really kind of clamoring for Triple H to come back, even though he was a heel and part of the two-man power trip. We all wanted him back and really felt like he left a void behind. So when he returned in 2002, when he was over like Rover, biggest ovation I think I've ever heard, but he quickly turned the corner by the time he worked with Shawn at SummerSlam, and then Eric Bischoff reintroduced the big gold belt, and then Triple H started beating everybody. Going into WrestleMania 19, it did feel like Triple H was ripe. And especially when you think about some of the promos they did leading up to this, Triple H said, to the effect of, people like you don't win the championship, that sort of shit. So to us, it felt like all signs were pointing towards Booker T winning the championship at WrestleMania 19. Now, this was not the main event. This was the undercard, and it was still a pretty good match. But at the end of the day, Triple H squeaks out a win again, and this really, really pissed off the audience. Now, for years, I wouldn't say defend the decision. I just kind of downplayed it. I didn't consider this to be as big of a missed opportunity as other fans were considering it to be. I definitely, in hindsight, would have put Booker T over here for sure. But when you look back on it, let's just, for argument's sake, say they did do that. Okay, belt is on Booker T. He wins the title. Who's to say WWE won't just take it right back off of him the next month? And it's not like this was in the main event or anything. So if Booker T won the title here and then dropped it a month or two later and then didn't hold the title again for like 2 more years, what would have really changed? Yes, it would have given Booker T a world championship win at WrestleMania, but a lot of guys have those. Chris Benoit had that too, and right after he won the title, they took it off of him a few months later, gave the belt to Randy Orton, and he was never near the world title again. So it's very possible that WWE could have still ruined Booker regardless of a championship victory here or not. But I think it would have been a cool first full circle moment for Booker T, since he kind of came in as the WCW champion, as the heel, to kind of win that championship back in WWE. Another company is also confident enough in you to give you that championship back, I think, would have been cool. He would go on to win it back as King Booker and all of that, King Booker. But, here would have been, I like this Booker T way better than King Booker. And if he would have walked out of WrestleMania 19 as champion, it would have been a great moment. I just don't look back on it as the travesty that everybody else does, because I've tried to always remain as impartial as possible when it comes to the heat that people like Triple H and John Cena and Roman Reigns and all of these other wrestlers have, because when they start winning too much, fans start just really starting to get delusional. So I try to acknowledge, when guys probably shouldn't have gone over, but I don't let that be a deciding factor as to whether or not I'm going to appreciate a talent's work. So Triple H should have lost, but he didn't, and the world will just keep on spinning. I don't really have any issues with any of the next few WrestleManias. Looking at these Money in the Banks, really no problem with them. Edge winning the first one, of course, and everything they would do after that, even with Kennedy winning, I was totally fine with that. The main events of WrestleMania 21, 22, 23, I thought all went the right way. I would have liked to see Triple H win the title in the main event of WrestleMania 2, but it wasn't crucial to, my love for wrestling or anything. So I'm kind of indifferent about that. And I think Shawn gave John Cena a hell of a match at WrestleMania 23. And as much as I would have loved to see Shawn get another run with the title, that win, put John Cena over as, that was the night that I kind of realized that, he's Hogan now. We hadn't really had a Hogan before. This is 3 straight WrestleManias that John Cena is getting his hand raised in a championship main event, winning the title the first time and retaining it in the next 2. And I was like, we haven't seen anything like this. We haven't seen anybody this dominant in 3 straight WrestleManias since the Hogan or Austin days. And I was surprised by it. I still probably preferred Triple H, but wasn't, that resistant to it and had no issues. It probably wasn't until we got until WrestleMania 25 that poor Triple H and Randy Orton had to go into the main event after following Shawn Michaels and Undertaker having the best match in WrestleMania history, in my opinion. And now they've got to go out into a really flat main event. And based on the build there, Triple H was champion going into that. And I always thought that was weird. And I would have maybe not changed the outcome of this match so much. I might have changed who was champion. I would have put the belt on Randy Orton and had him go into this thing as champion, because the way he's taken out the McMahons, punting Stephanie, and then Triple H tries to get revenge by breaking into Randy Orton's house. The build to this stuff was really fun, but Triple H was basically the babyface in this thing, right? And he's champion. So I think it would have been better if we had some sort of a title change here. So That's why I think, and Reese agrees with me here, that's why I think Randy Orton should have won the title at WrestleMania 25. I think that would have made much more sense from a storyline perspective in terms of how much further you could go and keep doing with this. Not that you couldn't anyway with Triple H hanging on to the title, but I would have definitely done a title change there, or I would have had Randy Orton champion somehow going into this, and Triple H going in there and beating him for the championship, not only getting revenge on Orton for what he did to his wife, but taking his most prized possession at the same time. That's what I would have done. You know what? I also think didn't they have the stip in that match too? Wasn't it like if Triple H got counted out or disqualified, he would lose the title? So they tried to add a little bit to it there, but it just would have been better if the title was won Randy Orton in my mind. So not only did the match have to follow Taker and Shawn, it made for another underwhelming WrestleMania main event that Triple H had the unfortunate pleasure of being a part of. Same thing happened to him at WrestleMania 18. The following year, WrestleMania 26, we're talking about Triple H again. Seems like his name comes up a lot on this list, but I would have definitely put Sheamus over Triple H in that match. Sheamus was building momentum. He was a young new star that I thought had an interesting look. I remember at that time, this was about 2 weeks, probably, maybe even less, before I recorded my very first video ever for YouTube, which is crazy. But around this time, I remember hearing the fans really hating on Sheamus. They didn't like him, but I also heard the same fans complaining that the same guys always get pushed. And so I'm like, well, what is it? What do you want? This is a new guy that WWE's sprung on us. He does have an interesting look. He looks different. We haven't seen a whole lot of guys with that type of haircut and that type of look, and they're pushing him. And for some reason, you don't like that, but you also don't like Triple H and Cena winning all the time. So I don't see the harm. And I think Jack Swagger was coming up around this time too. And I said, I don't see the harm in WWE giving these guys a shot and seeing if they can get over. Wrestling needs some new stars, so why don't we try that? And people just weren't having it for whatever reason. And Sheamus has gone on to show us, how great he is. This dude's ageless and timeless as well, having some of the best matches of his career just in the last couple of years. And he's been great in the WWE, and he was just getting started at this point. Triple H was already a super bona fide star by this point, winning or retaining the WWE title in multiple WrestleMania main events up until this point. It would have done nothing at all to harm Triple H to simply put Sheamus over clean here. And that's what I would have done. And Triple H, of course, having to win might have stalled Sheamus's momentum a bit. And if you look back at Sheamus's career, you give him a victory here at WrestleMania 26, it might have made him, now I think it might have made him a little bit higher of a star. I still think Sheamus achieved great things in WWE, but this would have been a good, feather in his cap and a notch on his belt to have this victory of this magnitude this early on in his career. And also on this card, we had Chris Jericho versus Edge. Now, Edge was off with the injury when him and Jericho were a team. While he was gone, Jericho was talking all that smack. I think he teamed with Big Show during that time. And then when Edge returned, he won the Rumble, I believe, right? And then got this match against Chris Jericho. And this was going to be perfect because it fits so perfectly in with the storyline. But Chris Jericho retained the title in this match. So going into this, I thought for sure that Edge would come back and win and beat Jericho for the title. Edge, to my knowledge, I don't think has a championship victory at WrestleMania, right? He's got championship matches. He's lost the WWE title to The Undertaker. He retained the World Heavyweight title against Del Rio. And he might have had another match in there somewhere that involved a championship, but he's never really had that championship win. This would have been a cool place to do it, and I'm surprised that they didn't. Still surprises me. So WrestleMania 26 is another one that just isn't fondly remembered by me. I don't really look back on that show with very many fond memories. That was about 6 months before I moved here to California. Crazy how time flies. WrestleMania 27. This one, Reese has got a couple of suggestions, and I agree. The first one is Michael Cole versus Jerry Lawler. Michael Cole got the victory in this match. Granted, it was a disqualification, but Michael Cole was being so unbelievably obnoxious at that time. And when they turned him heel, he did a great job at being a heel. My God, was he a fucking douche. And Jerry Lawler had somehow never had a WrestleMania match before. So him working with Cole, I just can't believe that he just wouldn't pile drive and pin Cole and celebrate, and they went the other direction with it. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the special guest referee. They still gave the fans some good moments here and sent them away happy and had the moments and all of that. But, technically in the record books, Michael Cole beats Jerry Lawler, and that's a bunch of horse shit. Lawler should have won that. And also, The Miz versus John Cena, a lot of people feel that The Miz should not have retained against John Cena. And I'm almost indifferent about this. I understand that belief that maybe Cena should have won, and The Miz being champion as it was already shocking enough. And The Miz retaining the championship was even crazier. But really, honestly, that might have been the only thing that could really get Miz over as a believable champion, is to retain. And I talked about that a lot back in the infancy of this channel, how The Miz really felt like an afterthought to me. This whole thing was about The Rock and John Cena. And every time I would do a video or a commentary after Raw, I'm like, The Miz is the WWE champion going into this thing, and you don't even know that he's there. He doesn't even feel like he's there. Everything is about The Rock and John Cena. Everything is about the challenger of the main event and another guy that's not even booked in a match on the show. And I thought this was a really weird way to book the main event. We had never seen anything like this. Not only is one member of the main event not even fucking visible in this whole thing, he's your champion. What are you doing? So I almost think like Cena should have been champion for all of this, and The Miz should have just by fluke won the Royal Rumble or something. And then he's an afterthought for a good reason. Then he's going in as a challenger. Nobody believes he has a chance to beat Super Cena. The Rock and Cena are talking smack and going back and forth, with Rock hosting WrestleMania. So then you go into the match, and Cena, maybe even to his own admission, overlooks The Miz, takes him for granted, doesn't really prepare enough because he's so fixated on The Rock. The two of them are doing the promo battle back and forth on Raw. All of John Cena's attention is on The Rock, and none of it is where it needs to be, and that is on the WWE champion, The Miz. But if it was reversed, he could be champion through all this and, kind of look past and overlook The Miz, and then The Rock slides in the ring during the main event, nails John Cena with the rock bottom, costs him the WWE title. The Miz wins the championship now at WrestleMania in a complete fluke. And he's like, holy shit, I just won the championship in the main event of WrestleMania. This is all because of The Rock. Now Cena's pissed, and now you got a real good reason to book that match. Of course, Cena's just got to wait a year for revenge, but he might also find a way to maybe get a rematch against The Miz right after that and potentially win his belt back. But to me, in the main event, that's what I would have done. So I think, would have had Cena win. And I agree, but I might have even taken it a degree further, and I would have had Cena as champion for this match. That way, when The Miz wins, it's a little more fun because, as you pointed out, you thought The Miz was champion for too long by this point because he did win the title the previous year, right? So by the time we got here, fans were wanting him to be done. So, yeah, that's probably how I would rebook WrestleMania 27. Reese and I don't really see any other issues until you get to WrestleMania 30. And of course, there's a couple of them here. We just got done talking about John Cena a minute ago. And this was a match that really ruffled the feathers of a lot of wrestling fans. Now, at the time with me doing my YouTube videos and commentaries, I was already seeing the writing on the wall. I could already tell that John Cena was going to beat Bray Wyatt just because he's John Cena and Cena always wins. And this was probably at peak John Cena hate height right here. No time that I can remember has Cena been hated more than right around this time. And like I just got done laying out on the Triple H video when he retired, I always flat out refused just to go along with the general program brainwashed fan opinion that automatically John Cena is Hitler and the Antichrist and a cancer, and he's selfish and he hates everybody else except himself, and all of these over the top irrational, unreasonable opinions that fans start getting when a wrestler wins too much. And it happens all the time. Happened with Triple H, happened with Cena, happened with Roman. It'll happen again. So I just refused to try to look at it in that black and white of terms. And I tried to tell myself in the predictions that maybe WWE will do the right thing here and put Bray Wyatt over. But if they don't, I still don't think it's the end of the world, because what's wrong with losing to John Cena at WrestleMania? And I think I was one that could at least, at the end of the day, appreciate that Bray Wyatt has a WrestleMania match against John Cena. That's pretty cool. When you think about 3 years prior, this is Husky Harris. Now he's got a big match against John Cena. He's going to get a nice, sweet, delicious paycheck in the mail a couple of months after the show. This is great for his career. But in the fans' minds, it means nothing unless he wins. That's it. He either wins or he is buried. There is no in between. So that opinion came out in my 2014 voice, which was a little different, a little more hardcore, because that's what I thought YouTube wanted. But then I quickly realized that that's not what I wanted. And of course, when John Cena won, it just added to his legacy of being the worst person ever. And I went on and I said I would rant sometimes back then. And one thing I would constantly repeat, I said, there's no way I can be proven right until time goes by. Time is going to prove me right. And I said, mark my words, there will come a day when you are going to back off this hate a little bit. And you're going to appreciate Cena for who he is and what he brought to the table. And you're not going to have this hardcore of an opinion on him in the future once he starts taking, maybe being less visible, less exposed, wrestles a little bit more part-time, and maybe even retires completely. When he's gone and he's out of the limelight, I'm telling you, you're going to respect him looking back. You know why? Because I've been through this exact same shit before. There have been plenty of wrestlers that I have despised as a kid, and then I grew up as an adult to appreciate him. I'm happy to say I'm being proven right at this very moment. Many of you who've been following me for years have turned the corner on John Cena, where you are like me now. You're like, okay, yeah, he won a couple times that I didn't want him to, and maybe he won too much, but we respect and appreciate his career for what it was. And I had Cena's back in that respect because I attached John Cena so closely to Chris Benoit, because once that Benoit murders happened and the wrestling was on the hot seat more than ever, WWE really had no choice but just to completely cold turkey change their image, move from TV 14 to TV PG, eliminate blood, eliminate chair shots to the head, try to maybe stop targeting that adult audience that prefers the racier, more violent content. You got to get away from that. NFL and WWE's under a lot of scrutiny right now with the CTE stuff, and it's life or death now for the company's sake. Now you got wrestlers who are murdering their families and killing themselves, and it's getting super gnarly, and you have got no choice but to drastically change your image, which is why I think they went with the hero Hulk Hogan-like John Cena for as long as they did, to let everything fucking cool off. And I thought John Cena represented wrestling well. He's not Shawn Michaels, who's pilled out of his mind. He's not a bunch of other wrestlers that have all sorts of drug, alcohol, or attitude problems or whatnot. He goes out, does public appearances, represents the WWE well, is well-spoken, presents himself well, and has found himself getting opportunities in Hollywood and whatnot. He was a good poster boy to have during one of the most controversial times in the company's existence. And I tried as hard as I could to desperately lay this out to the audience that fell on nothing but deaf ears, nothing but Greg sucks John Cena's cock, and Greg is obsessed with John Cena, and he jacks off to John Cena posters on his wall. That was the type of shit. That was the type of feedback for simply laying out a very intelligent argument. And when you look back now in hindsight, I'm right, aren't I? But here, against Bray Wyatt, he should have lost. I 1,000,000% agree with that. Now, back in the day, I think I maybe took the stance of defense only because it was out of, the fans were taking everything to such an insane degree. Bray Wyatt should go back to NXT. He should quit the business and go back to football. Everything, like crazy shit people were saying. He should quit wrestling and go teach home ec in some high school somewhere in buttfuck nowhere. This was the type of response that people were giving to this match. So I just refused to fall in line with that. Secretly, of course, John Cena should have lost here. You know why? Because it wouldn't have done anything to John Cena. Just like I laid out with Triple H earlier, how it wouldn't have killed him to put over Sheamus, wouldn't have killed John Cena to put Bray Wyatt over here either. John Cena had already well established himself as an icon, winning WrestleMania main event after WrestleMania main event. He could have easily lost to Bray Wyatt here, and it would have done nothing to harm the career of John Cena, and it would have done a lot to elevate the career of Bray Wyatt. I will always agree with that. But at the end of the day, I wasn't going to jump on this bandwagon that John Cena has completely ruined, wrestling. Now, Bray Wyatt, WWE ruined him every bit as bad as anybody did. So looking back, if you put Bray Wyatt over here, how different is his career? This is one of those matches where I think it probably was going to be significantly different. Yes, I still think he would have ran into the same problems he ran into and the Fiend stuff and all of that, but winning here against John Cena would have maybe forced the WWE to take care of him and protect him a little bit more, since this is a guy that has a clean win over your, modern day Hulk Hogan. So in hindsight, yeah, I kind of agree. I always say that the fans are going to have to look back and agree with me about what I said about John Cena, and I'm going to have to look back and agree with what they said about this match. And the ones that think that John Cena should have lost are right. He should have. He absolutely should have. Another match that I think should have gone the other way is The Undertaker's streak. Brock Lesnar is one of my favorite people in wrestling. Honestly, he is. And I am fine with even the streak ending just because of the moment it created. As much as I hate this moment, it's one of my favorite moments to go back and watch. Isn't that weird? And I think a lot of you probably feel the same way, yes? If, none of us really wanted the streak to end. I described it that night in my review. I said, it feels like my dog died. It feels like I have this just sense of loss. And it was like sad or something. It just hurt. I just did not like it. It did WrestleMania. His streak at WrestleMania felt so sacred. And when it ended, it was just almost gutting, even though it went to Brock and even though it created that great moment, that fella in the front row with his jaw dropping to the floor. That was awesome. And it's great to have that moment because it's so shocking. But the fact that they ended it blew my mind. And I believe that Undertaker should have, one of two things should have happened with the streak. He should have either retired undefeated at WrestleMania, or his last match should have been the night the streak ended, whenever that is. Maybe beat Brock Lesnar here, lose to Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania 33. It would have been great if Roman was who he is now at WrestleMania 33. Think about that. We may have never seen The Undertaker again. But unfortunately, I don't have, the match with AJ was fine and everything, but it would have been better off to go that way. So I'm with you on this one, Reese. I think John Cena should have put over Bray Wyatt and Brock Lesnar should have put over The Undertaker. Because actually, I wouldn't even have done this match because I really liked to see Brock Lesnar get over the way he did, the way he slaughtered John Cena at SummerSlam a few months later. But I would have put The Undertaker in the ring with just a different opponent and had him win, and put Brock in the ring with somebody else at WrestleMania and have Brock squash him. And then go on to beat John Cena at SummerSlam anyway, is probably what I would have done there. WrestleMania 31 has a match that I think we can all agree should have gone the other way, and that is Triple H against Sting. Sting coming in at the end of 2014 was pretty cool, and then starting a feud with Triple H. And like I said, Triple H is a guy that we have been mentioning a lot here so far in this podcast, and this is just a head-scratching one because not only did they overbook the hell out of this, it didn't feel right. This was the WrestleMania that was out in the San Francisco Bay Area, and of course, that's here on the West Coast, which means we had a daylight WrestleMania, and this match took place really early in the card to where Sting, a guy that is so associated with darkness, comes out in broad daylight And then Triple H comes out in this like Terminator gear that is also looks very strange in broad daylight, and the whole thing just didn't come off right. You had the NWO showing up, you had DX showing up, and at the end of the day, Triple H got the win, and I think that's horseshit. I think out of respect for Sting, I mean, WWE really does come off spiteful sometimes, like what they did with Booker T and their hesitation to put over WCW stars. Sting coming in after refusing to work for WWE for so long. I can understand why they wouldn't want to put him over somebody like Triple H, but Sting at that time was kind of near retirement. He went into the Hall of Fame, or he would go into the Hall of Fame maybe the next year. And for him just to come in and get that WrestleMania win out of respect, I think would have been cool. It would have been nothing wrong with that. It would have made WWE look good. You know, that would have been, something that they didn't have to do but chose to do type of thing. And, for a company that's so worried about its image, I think a lot of fans would have appreciated that. I think a lot of fans, especially those of us who, get super annoyed with WWE from time to time, would have at least said, that was kind of cool of them to do that. But instead, Triple H won, and it wouldn't have mattered if he lost. But Triple H also has an ego too, and he probably wants in the record books that he has victories over these names. And maybe Sting's a guy that he's always wanted to beat, and he did, and we never really got a return deal here, I don't think. And then Sting would get injured, and the thing with Seth Rollins, and now he's on AEW, still kicking ass, diving off of shit, and acting crazy. And I think next week he turns 104, and he's still out there doing dives over the top rope and stuff. So Sting's the man, and he definitely should have won at WrestleMania 31. WrestleMania 32, Reese thinks that Jericho and Styles should have gone the other way. At this point, Styles was still fairly new and likely not as trusted as he is today. They were likely giving Jericho his win back from Fastlane, but not every multiple match program needs each person to have a win over the other, and I completely agree. I was surprised. I thought AJ would get the win over Jericho. You're probably right about not being totally trusted yet, but I think his debut at the Rumble and the response he got should have been evidence enough that this guy was a big deal. But as much as I agree with this, it would have been cool to see AJ win here, especially when you consider what he would go on to do in just a couple of months. That's also what makes this okay for me, because WWE got their act together with AJ Styles. And by the time we got to September of that year, he's WWE champion. And that's something that WWE has been known to not do, like we talked about with Sting, and like we talked about with Booker T, and some other WCW talent that they brought in, or talent that hasn't worked with WWE but gained a huge following, made a huge career outside of Vince's umbrella. To be coming in and given the championship and trusted to that degree was pretty amazing. And he was a two-time champion at that. And AJ's had an awesome career in WWE. He's one guy that, despite everything, WWE's actually treated right. How many times do we sit here and talk about the lost potential and how many great pieces of talent are being wasted? How AJ Styles didn't wind up on that list blows my mind. He was treated like a star from the minute he got there. And that's why I think Cody Rhodes has got a really good chance to be a big deal in WWE based on how WWE treated AJ Styles. And a lot of fans, I think, appreciate WWE for that. And I think Kevin Owens is also kind of on this list, although Kevin Owens very much needs to be world champion again. Once he gets there, these are a couple of guys that, by some miracle, WWE actually did right by. So AJ, of course, has got a big match this weekend against Edge as well. Another high-profile match at WrestleMania that should be all kinds of fun. So, yeah, I agree with what you're suggesting there with AJ and Jericho at 32. But, hey, at least we got the belt on AJ shortly after that. WrestleMania 33, I definitely agree with Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt. The match you don't believe even needs the WWE title. I kind of agree. Putting the title on Bray Wyatt at the Elimination Chamber was pretty surprising that it was that fast, but then to drop it right away to Randy Orton was kind of deflating a little bit, and nobody really wanted to see that because fans have been waiting forever for Bray Wyatt to finally get on the map as a main eventer, and then as soon as they give us a taste of it, they yank it away. And the fans were getting tired of that shit. We definitely have a couple of good candidates for WrestleMania 34 as well. Number one, Charlotte and Asuka. Now, this one we've talked about a lot on the channel. I remember, again, as I tend to do, and I'm sure you guys love, I defended this decision as well, and I cited kind of similar reasons to what I cited with Cena and Bray Wyatt. And I said, hey, Asuka, if she's going to lose her streak, she's undefeated, she's been so dominant at this point, and you're going to end it, hey, why not end it on the biggest stage possible? And that would be against your best wrestler at WrestleMania. So I was just hoping for a good match. They kicked ass in that match, and I think if Asuka would have won, it might have gone down as a more historic WrestleMania match. Fans look at it, kind of in a sour way, but the match was really good, and it was pretty badass. And it probably, would have been better if Asuka won. But again, I tended to go against the grain there because the fans take their hate to such an unbelievable degree. And I have people tweeting me and sending me DMs telling me that Asuka should quit the business, and go back to NXT. And I'm like, this girl just got a big time championship match on the show of shows. Now you're putting her in NXT? Seems like her career is going in the opposite direction to me. She's moving up. She's lost one match in the company and she should quit. So that's where I kind of I'm like, can we just be fair and be logical about this? Can you just control your emotions for 5 seconds and say, okay, yeah, I wish she would have won, but does she really need to quit the business? And that's what a lot of people were saying. So I'm like, fuck that. Who cares? At the end of the day, Asuka's going to be just fine. And I said that at the time. She's going to go on to win multiple world championships. She's going to be a legend in the company. She's going to be badass. She's going to succeed. And everybody said, no, you're crazy. She's back in NXT. She's going to be gone from the company in 3 months. And she went on to do great things. But it wasn't all great. She sat around, didn't do anything for a while. They were kind of using her in a tag team. They certainly fumbled the ball with her a few times, but then they sometimes picked it back up and ran pretty hard with it. And she has had some pretty big victories on pay-per-view against all of the best. In the WWE, she's beaten them all. Charlotte and Becky and Bayley and you name them. So she still did very well for herself. The loss to Charlotte did not kill her career, which many fans insisted that it would. It was just their anger talking, not their brains. And here we are. Asuka's due back soon. And when she comes back, it's going to be awesome. I hope that she shows up at WrestleMania in some capacity, or at least on Monday. That is, if she's healthy or whatever's going on there. But still, even with that all being said, I look back on it now in hindsight, and I kind of wish Asuka would have won that one because it would have given her the championship and she would have been undefeated, meaning that whoever does beat her, it's probably even a bigger deal than it was at WrestleMania. But it could have still been Charlotte. And that's what some fans have to realize as well. They probably would have been equally mad. Asuka could have won here. That would have been great. But knowing WWE and the way they're going to present and push Charlotte for the rest of our wrestling lives, she is very likely going to potentially beat Asuka anyway for the title at the next pay-per-view or something. So maybe giving Asuka the win here was the right thing to do. I agree. Also, AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura. Yeah, it would have been cool if WWE put the title on Shinsuke. He won the Royal Rumble. A lot of fans were expecting him to win, and he did not. And then they did kind of like the heel turn thing at the end, which was a big disappointment. And I think at the time I didn't care too much because who am I to complain? WWE has already put the title on AJ Styles, which was mind-blowing enough as it was. And I wasn't going to let that... to me, that was a win in my mind. And if the title was on, basically the way I was looking at it is if the title was on either of these guys, Greg was cool. So to me, it wasn't the end of the world, but I think putting the title on Nakamura here would have established him as another world championship contender. And WWE has basically just paid this guy to do nothing for years. And he's so entertaining. And I just wish he would, made it to that level in the company. And now I just think he's a guy that's always going to have a place on the show and on the card. But in terms of a guy that's going to main event to WrestleMania, I don't know if it's in the cards at this point for Nakamura. And they had a chance to really establish him here. And especially now in hindsight, the fact that he's stuck around and re-signed with the company a couple of times, he was here for the long haul. So if you would have had him, establish a run or two as a world champion back then, that would have, helped the stock in the company. Sometimes I don't know why they do what they do. And as you brought up, it was a good, one of the first examples of, NXT talent really kind of losing their luster once they get to the main roster. And we see that happen so often. I completely agree with you on WrestleMania 35, the Fatal 4-Way Women's Tag Team Championship match. I was not ready to see the Iconics win the titles, and Sasha and Bayley were great together. And for them to win the titles, I think it was at the previous month, that Elimination Chamber, right? Sasha left for a while. It just caused all sorts of problems. The Iconics never really got off the ground in WWE, which wasn't completely their fault either. Once they started becoming more noticeable and entertaining, WWE cut them loose, which is kind of their deal. But overall, I would have kept the titles on Bayley and Sasha for a while. So luckily, they kind of made up for that, and they would have another run together after this the year later. But I would have done the same. I would have kept the belts on them for sure. I don't even like talking about WrestleMania 36 because that's when COVID happened, and we had to watch this thing take place in the Performance Center, which is still surreal to even think about. But we all went through it, and we went through it together, and it wasn't that long ago. And in that Performance Center WrestleMania, we had Becky Lynch defending the women's championship against Shayna Baszler, and that's where you should have put Shayna Baszler over, because Becky had held the belt for a year. This is a perfect place to establish Baszler. Baszler is like a Ronda Rousey type or a Brock Lesnar type, and they went in the opposite direction of that, only to have Becky forfeit the title when she got pregnant and have Asuka run with the belt. So a big missed opportunity there with Shayna. I agree with you completely, and I also agree with the other championship match. I wanted to see Rhea Ripley beat Charlotte, and I'm pretty sure I probably said this in the review, but I was less bothered by this one because it was in the empty arena. I loved the build they did to Ripley and Charlotte, and Rhea went to Raymond James, the football stadium, and was looking around and looking ahead to WrestleMania. Wow, when I'm here facing Charlotte and all the fans are in the arena, this is going to be so amazing. And to see that taken away from them was heartbreaking. So by the time we got to the Mania match, I didn't even care. And yeah, I would have put Rhea Ripley over. I was bummed out that Charlotte got the win there. I thought it was cool that she won the NXT title. I thought it would have been cooler to establish Rhea Ripley as the new kid on the block, because I fell in love with her at the end of the previous year when she won the NXT title and she finally put an end to Shayna Baszler's run. And she's just very physically impressive and a badass, and she's very unique in a lot of ways. And I just thought they had a star on their hands, and she lost. But at the end of the day, it was so unimportant to me, basically. Now, if this would have been in front of the audience and Charlotte won, then I might have been way madder about it. But since it was in the empty arena, I didn't give a fuck. I thought both women looked amazing. It would have been so cool to see them in their gear with that audience, with the pyro and the entrance, and just the fact that we were robbed of that, to me, is the biggest issue. And I didn't really care who won or lost. But technically, based on the storylines and the angles and stuff, yeah, I agree with both of those matches. The women's matches should have gone the other way, 100%. And in terms of last year's WrestleMania, the only one I can really think of is Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt again. Poor Bray Wyatt is the victim of a lot of these things, and he already dropped a match to Randy Orton and John Cena in previous WrestleManias. Now he's facing Randy Orton again as The Fiend after he was burned and murdered by Randy Orton, and you would think he would get some revenge here. And Alexa Bliss returned only to turn on him, and Randy Orton beat The Fiend in an extremely underwhelming match, just like their previous WrestleMania match was at WrestleMania 33. And it was such a bummer. And that match definitely should not have gone that way. Now, that's kind of the end of my list here. I think there are many that you guys could potentially suggest. And there was a lot of matches that I thought about. Just at the end of the day, if I didn't list them here, it was probably because I just didn't think at the end of the day it really mattered. So there might be some matches that you might have changed, but would it have changed things really for the better? Or, is it necessary to, pick apart some of those undercard matches on some of those early WrestleManias? Because at the end of the day, a lot of those didn't matter. They were TV matches that were just put in front of a WrestleMania audience is all it was. So I didn't really think A lot of them were too important, but these are the ones that Reese and I came up with. So let us know what you think, what you agree or disagree with. Is there anything on here that you don't agree with? Any match that was brought up that you would say, no, you're wrong, the right person won there? Let us know. Be interested to hear what you think. I want to thank Reese for the very generous donation. Thanks again for this. You've been waiting a while for this video to come out. I apologize for that, but I wanted to kind of put it out on WrestleMania week since it's a fun time of year and it's time for celebration. So you guys take care. Thanks again for watching, and get ready to rock and roll for WrestleMania 38 weekend. It's going to be a blast, and I'll be talking to you real soon. Y'all take care. Peace.